Hello and welcome to the Pod of the Damned. I'm your host Ian, and joining me as always is my co-host Nico. How's it going, buddy?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, good. This could be an interesting episode, Nico, because I think we're both
Yeah,
we're both tired and sleep deprived and everything else. So this could be fun.
absolutely fucked. Yes.
Oh, sorry, I'm in the
Oh,
middle of drinking my coffee here as well. It's really good for the introduction. Um,
and Shira wants to be on camera.
and we've got a kitty cat on camera as well. Nico, you're going to take a couple of weeks off after this.
Yeah, I'm on holiday for 2 weeks.
The listeners are just jumping for joy right now. That's actually what they're rioting over in France.
Is it?
Is the fact that you're not here for another couple of weeks.
Oh, I thought they were rioting because they wanted me to stay off for more
Is that...
than 2 weeks.
Yeah, probably. Probably. Couple of things just to pick up on, Nico. I did a Twitter sort of poll the other week of people's worst horror movies, and someone did pick Doctor Sleep. Just saying.
And they've not seen Child's Play yet or something. What's the scoop with that?
They just thought Doctor Sleep was the worst horror movie they've ever seen. Just saying, bro. Just saying. Okay. Don't forget, guys, we are a horror podcast that deep dives into a different topic every single week in our quest to create a leaderboard of the best and worst horror movies of all time. This is episode number 79, and in today's show, we are talking about Long Time Dead. Now, as it turns out, Nico, this is a horror movie that no one has seen.
It's one that was requested by one of my mates, actually.
It is, and it's a movie that I'm familiar with. It's a movie I watched, I think around the time it came out, maybe a little bit later, but it's a movie I remember watching in my sort of teen years. And when I was putting out the feelers for, listener opinions and scores and all that, turns out nobody's seen it, Nico.
I'm trying to remember if it was, because I remember seeing it at the cinema. I think it was like 2000.
It came out in 2002, so
yeah,
it would have been the early 2000s. I don't really remember it being out in the cinema, but 2000, I was 11 when it came out, so maybe it was just a little bit earlier for me. We'll get into all that in just a couple of minutes, so don't forget, guys, if you would like to support us across our social media platforms, you can do so. We're on Twitter at Damned Podcast, we're on Facebook and Instagram at Pod of the Damned. You can email us at podofthedamned@gmail.com, and you can also subscribe to us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Pod of the Damned. We've got a cat licking herself on, so if you're listening to this on the download, you're maybe very lucky right now, because we've currently got a cat licking herself on camera.
She's maybe not. You can just see a head and a paw.
That's true. This if you're watching, this is an exclusive for the Patreon subscribers who get the video feed, and they get it first. You subscribe to our Patreon and you can watch a cat lick herself.
Yeah, stop it.
Okay, Nico, you are familiar with our leaderboard. Where do you think Long Time Dead, this is the 75th movie, milestone movie, that we've covered, where do you think it's going to come on the leaderboard?
I can't see it come too high, but I don't think it'll. I think it's going to be a below average one.
So you think maybe just below halfway?
Yeah.
That so would be so maybe like 40.
I think it's going to have a score of like 5-ish, or under.
Oh, well, that doesn't put us halfway on our leaderboard, my friend.
Does it, eh?
No. If it scores 5, it goes into 66th place.
I think it'll be round about there. Because I remember the critics fucking hated this.
Yeah. Okay, right. Shall we just get into it?
Go for it.
Okay, we are talking about Long Time Dead. This movie was released in 2002, was directed and written by Marcus Adams, and stars Joe Absalom, Alec Newman, and Marsha Thomason. The IMDb plot is as follows. A young college student and his friends use a Ouija board to hold a seance, triggering a chain of mysterious deaths that may be caused by an otherworldly force. Now, I said to you earlier that no one has seen this. When I put out the feelers for our listeners, as I do for every single movie that we talk about, to give us their scores and opinions, we got no responses, Nico. None. Not one. So I decided which is a first. I think that's a first for this podcast. And at first I was like, oh shit, are we just like not a popular podcast anymore? So I decided to do another poll on our Twitter account. And out of all the votes that we got, 86.2% of people have not seen this movie.
Yeah, I remember it was quite high, like billed quite as the best British horror film, and then I went to see it, and I remember the critics were hating it. So it was like popular with folk, but not popular with critics.
It's weird because this might be a shorter than regular episode because the amount of information that's actually out there about this movie as well is ridiculously slim, and given the fact that we've not got a lot from you guys, our listeners, to say about it. The movie financially did okay.
Yeah.
Like, I was looking at the figures. I don't have a budget for this movie, but I'm relatively confident it's on a tiny budget.
Yeah.
The movie grossed 22.6 million. So I mean, like, when you think about it, and when you think how sort of unsuccessful and unpopular this movie actually is, it did okay. Like, I mean, I know that's not like mind-blowing numbers, but for this little sort of 2002 horror movie, this British horror movie as well, that's all right. And British horror at that time, in 2002, a couple of big hitters came out in 2002. We had Dog Soldiers for one,
Yeah.
which we've covered on the show, and you know that when we sort of know the success that turned out to be. But even bigger than that, we had 28 Days Later, which is a hugely successful horror movie. Got its sequel. Still rumors going on about another one of those coming out. So, you know, it's not like British horror was in a particularly horrible place at that time.
Well, if I remember rightly, it pretty much was, and this was like the first one of those three that came out.
Was this the first one of the three? I read somewhere it was the middle one, but it could have been the first one.
Oh, okay. So I seem to remember seeing this first for some reason, unless I was working away from home. So yeah.
But yeah, so basically, no one's seen this movie. So let's get into it. Let's go through it. Would you do what these people did in this movie? You're on a night out, Nico. You're out in the club. You're pissed. You're high. You're whatever.
Out at a legal rave.
Exactly. I'm sure you've been to a few of those, Nico.
Me, never. I'm sweet as can be. I've not even had an alcoholic drink yet.
Today.
Yeah.
No, but you're out, you're clubbing, you're high, you're whatever, you're on whatever. Would you do a Ouija board in that situation?
Probably, because I was that dumb back then.
It's one of those things, isn't it? Because like I've been asked before by people, oh, would you do that? Would you do a Ouija board? And I'm just like, yeah. Like I'm you know me, Nico. I'm not a person who really believes in all this shit. So the prospect of doing a Ouija board for me doesn't really faze me.
Same.
So yeah, I mean, I get why it would, you know, especially if people are particularly spiritual and believe in obviously demons and everything else. But obviously, like I say, that's not really me. So it's not really something that bothers me. You know what does bother me about this movie? The fucking poster for it gives it away.
I know.
So, for those 86.2% of our followers who have not seen this movie, if you look at the poster for this movie, you know who the bad guy is for the majority of the film.
And that's the thing. They're making out, right? It's a secret that you don't know he's the one that's fucking possessed. It's just, it annoyed the shit out of me, because even in the trailers, like, I remember the trailers for this, and the trailers just see him as the demon thing, and yet you're like, well, you've done the big reveal already.
It's one of the weird things as well, because it's one of the things I actually think the movie does all right as well, is, you know, it hides our villain, and the reveal of the villain is relatively cool as well, you know, with that shot when he's sort of looking through the gaps and whatever it is, and his eyes change. Like it's don't get me wrong, it's not like groundbreaking or anything, but it's one of the things in this movie that's relatively well done. And
Yeah.
I feel just like, obviously, I think when I first watched this at like 11 or 12 years old, I probably was quite shocked by it because I was 11 or 12 and
Yeah.
I was an idiot and I probably just didn't notice the box. But you know, like now you look at it and if it was someone who was watching it now, had looked at the poster and was watching the movie, anyone who's even got a couple of brain cells has already put two and two together, and it ruins what one of the sort of few decent things there is about this movie. It's
Yeah.
difficult. I'm really kind of in two minds about how I feel about this film. I remember liking it. You know,
A
when
lot of folk did. That's what I mean. A
I,
lot of folk loved this, but the critics hated it.
I do remember liking it, especially like I say, you know, in the first like few years after it came out. I think it was a Blockbuster video job that I first watched this.
Right.
Um, if I remember rightly. But I remember liking it when I was younger, and then I watched it again a few years ago, and think then I, for the first time in many many years, and I was like, oh, this, and my memories are just, you know, maybe a nostalgic thing that I was giving it, and then I watched it again, obviously for the purposes of this podcast, and I mean, I still don't hate it.
Yeah. Same.
It's just one of those very weird things. Um, and like we say, like it did okay. And I'm gonna assume most of the majority of the money it made was obviously in the British market, but it was released worldwide in theaters. You know, I think you're looking at its IMDb was released in 20 odd countries, so it's not like it was an exclusively sort of UK based movie. It was released in the States. It was obviously released here. It was released in all the biggest markets.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, in terms of like this sort of demon summoning supernatural style movie, is there anything really that stands out for you in this movie? Because it's one of the things I do have sort of against it. This movie is very paint by number. It's very predictable.
Yeah. Like, I'm not gonna lie. This is one of those. It came along when horror was not that good from Britain, and basically, I remember the very first scene is was it Marrakesh or Morocco or whatever it is to say,
Yeah.
and you're like, yep, this is just gonna copy every single one of them from the 80s that was decent, and it pretty much does. And they do it with a cast of folk that were in all the like they were on all the like soaps that are over here.
Yeah.
So it was like your EastEnders and like Corey and all them lot.
Well,
So you knew it was going to be bigger than what the critics were saying.
that's the thing, isn't it? Like, especially for you know us folk here from the UK, watching this, like, it's filled with familiar faces, which
Yeah,
possibly is something that maybe I don't know, it maybe just buys it a little bit of leeway from us in terms of how we
yeah,
critique it because, you know, if it was full of a bunch of unknowns, we'd probably be going in on this like with a we'd be 2 foot in this one, you know,
yeah,
yeah, and then just probably being relatively unforgiving about it. But considering, you know, there's a lot of people in there who we know, we recognize, and a lot of people who we generally know and recognize from doing decent work, and some of the cast here have gone on after this to continue to have, you know, decent careers as well. So definitely something I think that probably buys it a little bit of leeway, at least from me, and I would imagine, you know, from a lot of other people as well.
yeah.
Um,
Because like, don't get me wrong, it's not like it's not bad act. It's actually acted all right.
yeah.
There's a few bits that go OTT, but it's the bits you expect them to go OTT. You know what I mean?
Well,
Like,
there's
for example, the comedian in the toilet. I've forgotten her name. The one that
yeah,
just screams her head off.
yeah. There's
So,
definitely. I mean, listen, we've already sort of spoken about like how predictable this movie is, and in terms of the content of what's in this movie, it does just hit all of those classic horror movie tropes, doesn't it? You know, you've
yeah,
got the sort of the false ending. You know, when you know we think it's over, but it's not really over.
yeah,
You've got your red herring villain in Becker. You know, everyone thinks it's him that's the villain, but it's not really him. You know, and he's
yeah,
also this sort of evil, shady character.
yeah. You saying as well about the spoiling it, right? So the poster, as you know, spoils it.
Yeah.
And I was in the cinema sitting there with I think it was Kat, and I goes, "Oh, I wonder when he's going to turn." And she went, "What do you mean?" Because I thought it was going to be one of those ones the demons can go between all of them.
Yeah,
You know, it'll just jump from one to the other
yeah.
because of the poster. But then, yeah, so I sort of spoiled it for her, even though, even though it was already spoiled when we were walking at the fucking cinema and the poster was right next to us as we were walking in.
And speaking of and going on with tropes as well, what was with this trope of having a friend who just records everything with a handheld camera?
No,
Did you have one of those friends, Nico?
I had a mate that used to like taking pictures all the time, but no fucking video
So you
camera.
had a photographer friend, essentially. Like
Yeah.
that we've all got those.
Well, yeah, we've got a few,
Yeah.
but
But
no, back then it was like a little fucking wind up spoolie camera, you know.
yeah.
And that friend quickly didn't get invited to the legal raves after that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but it's just bizarre. Like, this isn't the only horror movie that does this. Like, just have that friend who's
Yeah.
randomly recording everything. I don't really understand. Maybe it's an American thing because it's the American. Well, I think is he Canadian? I can't remember if he's an American or Canadian.
Yeah.
Apologies if I'm offending any Canadians out there. But maybe it's like an American thing, and they did just at that time period have loads of people around who were, recording things on handheld cameras. It's the early
Yeah.
2000s. Who knows? But yeah, this is one of the big drawbacks for me for this. This movie is, number one, it's just heavily predictable. Number two, it's just riddled, isn't it, with absolutely classic horror tropes that we've seen done millions of times before, and
Yeah.
it doesn't do any of them better than what we've seen before. And this is the problem when you're going to make a movie like this. You need to kind of put your own sort of fresh, up-to-date spin on it. Even if that then doesn't become as successful or as good as something else, you can sort of go and you can watch this movie and be like, right, we're at least going to go see something that's not been done before, or something that's not
Yeah.
been done very often. But because this movie is just hitting all those notes, isn't it, that we've seen so many times, it kind
Well, it
of...
confused me at the start. See when it went, gin over and over, and I'm like, oh well, it's gotta be a fucking genie. Uh, and Kat's like, why? And I'm like, well, because every other movie where it's been a gin, it's been a fucking genie.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing that changed for me. Like everything else was like I was waiting for him to go, put your 3 wishes in. You get it?
I mean, in terms of the Jinn, which is our sort of big evil in this movie, it's not the big bad that is often picked in, especially sort of Western horror movies. I think in stuff that comes out of like the Middle East, that obviously is something. Because I had a quick look up about what a Jinn is to see kind of how if the movie kind of portrayed it relatively accurately. And they did get some things right. This is the jinns obviously apparently, according to what I believe to be myth anyway, can appear in human form. It can possess people. It can seek revenge if it's injured. So they kind of got some of it right. It's not a case of they just threw out a spirit form, which again is something that I think maybe back in the day was something that was a little bit more commonplace, right? We're just going to pick a type of demon and we're just going to assign whatever attributes to it we want. And I think that would have been something that would have been really easily done here, considering the sort of the budget and the final product. And I don't want to say laziness, because I don't think this movie was made lazily. I think this movie was made with a bit of love, but I think it was just maybe something that was really telling of that time period of what the things were coming out.
Yeah.
One of the things, again, I promise I'll try and maybe say something positive about this movie at some point. But one of the things that we always talk about on this show is less is more, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I've lost count about how many times I've said, we've said less is more, less is more, less is more. But
This uses that a lot.
yeah, sometimes you do need to show us something, right? And of all the deaths that happen in this movie, and I think that there is quite a few of them. This isn't a death light movie. There's a lot of death in this movie. I think we only actually see one of them on screen.
Yeah, 2, I think it is. So you
Is it?
see the guy getting pulled through the wall,
Yeah.
and then you see the one at the end when it's like, oh, it's all done and dusted. Oh, and Becker as well when he gets his face mashed in.
Okay, so you see a couple of them on screen, but given how many there actually are,
Yeah,
I think that's a big detriment to this movie because the ways in which the characters die do seem to be like relatively sort of gruesome and horrific deaths. You think, excuse me, you think of of Joe's death. It looks like he gets his throat ripped out. Um, Stella's death looks particularly brutal in that toilet scene.
yeah, where you just see the feet clambering.
Yeah, and I quite like that. I think that's quite a good effect. But
I like that one.
you know, I think when you're up to that point, we hadn't been shown anything.
Yeah.
And
Well, all you'd seen was the burn marks in the back of the first death's legs.
yeah, I
Was that
mean,
Annie?
I guess we could kind of say maybe we can count that. Could we count that as a death we see because it's not that actually kills her; it's the fall that kills her.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Like, that's the weird thing. You talk about illegal raves. The illegal rave in Aberdeen used to be at the wool mill. So that could have easily happened to anybody at that point.
Yeah.
Because
So
that place was fucking huge.
I do, I do just think it's another thing that's held this movie back, and I'm gonna assume that the majority of that was not a creative choice and was maybe a budgetary choice.
Yeah.
It's one of the things though, because when we get to it, I do still have some thoughts and opinions from people out there who have seen this movie to read out. I've just kind of lifted them off of sites like Letterboxd and IMDb and things.
Yeah.
But one of the things I saw getting leveled at this movie was that the effects in it were really bad. I've seen
I
quite
didn't
a
think they
lot
were
of
that
people,
bad,
and
to
I
be
actually
honest.
think it's one of the things that was okay about this movie, considering obviously it's a low budget film, considering you know what we've got to work with and what we see on screen. I actually think the effects that we see on screen are pretty fucking good. I know
Yeah.
there's a couple like that when we see sort of the burn marks across several different characters, they all look pretty good to me. That's that shot of Joe with his neck sort of ripped out. I know you can still see Joe's neck pulsing, but he's actually alive, so that's gonna happen.
Yeah.
But the effects on that look pretty good. I even think the CGI of the eyes changing was all right for 2002.
I liked it when it changed to like the serpent eyes. I thought it was quite cool.
I mean, it's not aged like incredibly well, but
But it was good for then.
for 2002, I actually think that was a pretty decent effect. So there you go. I found my positive, Nico.
You think the special effects weren't as bad as folk are making it?
Yeah, I do. I genuinely think they do.
I
So
like the fact they stuck to mainly fucking practical effects.
yeah,
Like the last time you see his eyes change, just before the big reveal that the demons moved to somebody else, that was just done with he closes his eyes and they shine a light on it.
yeah,
And I thought it worked quite well, to be honest. I was so surprised at how good that actually looked.
yeah. I actually think it ended up looking pretty decent. So there you go. I think that's probably going to be one of my few positives that I do have to say. I don't know. At this point, Nico, is there any positives you would like to say about Long Time Dead?
It's actually a decent enough movie. It's something. It is definitely a Netflix and chill movie. Like, don't get me wrong,
Netflix
but
and chill to this one, Nico.
that may have once or twice. But yeah, it's it is one of those ones you can once you've watched it once, you don't need to fucking see any more of it. You know what I mean? You don't need to see it over and over again. But I think it got lost in the mix when it was around about that time because it sets up for an hour one. I reckon it could have actually been a decent one.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just think like the overall. I mean, I've still got another couple of points. We're not wrapping up just yet, but this is a competently made movie.
Ah,
There's nothing in this movie that I watch and I sit and I think, oh, that's terrible. That's really poorly made. They've made a really bad decision there. I just think it's like you say. I think it's a combination of things. It's a victim of its time.
yeah,
It's dated itself quite badly. I think it doesn't. You watch this and it's these characters are very, early 2000s hipster kind of,
They're late 90s, early 90s, yeah.
the fashion sense. There's a lot of flares in this movie. You've got and again, you've got the person with the handheld camera. You've got the person who doesn't use electricity and lives on a barge. I mean,
You've got the long-haired guy that's obviously the drug dealer of the group. Yeah,
yeah, and
yeah,
it's
all that shit, you know what I mean?
so I think this movie very much is a victim of its sort of time period that it came out. It's not, we talk about those other two British movies that came out in 2002, you've got Dog Soldiers and you've got 28 Days Later. I don't think there's anything realistically in those movies that dates them as badly as this does. If someone said to you about either of those movies, oh, they came out like a decade later, there's nothing really in them that you would really argue about. Like you could say, right, okay, yeah, I kind of get that. So it's one of those things I think that maybe just works against this movie. If someone was to not watch this, if someone who hasn't seen this was to go and watch it now, they might guess that this movie actually came from earlier. Someone could turn around to them and say this came out in the late 90s. There's nothing really in it that people would maybe have to say against that. Do you remember what clubbing was like in the early 2000s, Nico?
I do very well, actually.
Does the movie portray it well?
It portrays the illegal raves quite well with the chill out room and everything, but clubbing wise, not really.
Did you ever leave a nightclub to go snort cocaine off a railway line?
No, I never did rails.
Never did rails.
I may have snorted off somebody's arse once or twice. like that was the thing to do when it was like the 90s and 90s. It was yeah, you do it off the other person whilst you're doing other things.
Nico has lived a very full life, shall we say.
No, I just stuck to all the tropes that everyone else did at that time.
Also, what you're saying is you're just a little sheep.
Yes, totally, yeah. That was it, yeah.
Okay, like I said to everyone, this is probably going to be a slightly shorter episode for a number of reasons, so there's only a couple of things that I still want to cover. The pacing of this movie bugs the fuck out of me.
I knew it would.
So, don't get me wrong, we get into things relatively quickly, right? The movie goes along at a decent pace. The problem for me about this film is, right, we've got a relatively big group of core characters.
Yeah.
You've got, 7 of the group? And then if you take in fact, you've got Becker, you've got the dad as well, and these are all characters that we seem to have to deal with. It's a relatively big group of core characters for what is a very quick sort of 90-minute possession movie. And we've got
I think if it was longer, it would be shorter.
Oh, no, I'm not saying it needs to be longer at all. I think.
Oh, that's all right.
I think its 90-minute runtime, if anything, is probably already long enough. If anything, I would like to trim this down. What I mean is, I think there's too many characters for that. I don't think you need. I think you could, because the problem you have is you need to then start knocking them off really quickly. Yeah. And then what ends up happening is what happens here, because the character of Lucy, realistically, she's one of our sort of main characters, right? She's the one who did the summoning. She's the one who performed the seance. She's the
one that has the idea of the binding after Becker tells her.
Exactly.
She's leading that whole thing as well, and you don't see her death.
Exactly my point. You
should see her one, because I get before it, right? Before it, you're hiding the fact he's the killer, right?
Yeah.
So before it, hiding the death, not seeing the thing that's killing him, that's understandable. You've seen who the killer is now, because it's had the eyes change when looking in the thing, and then next thing you know, she's hung in the lift shaft.
She is the. I mean, obviously we've got our main hero for the majority of the film, Liam, but we don't think that Liam is our main hero through the majority of the film. We think it's Lucy.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously we've got this sort of thread going throughout the movie of Liam's dad, and he's sort of met him before, and blah blah blah. But like we said, Lucy's the one who performs everything, and I think she's a character that did deserve to get that moment of finding out who the killer is and having that sort of face to face, and then us getting to see her on screen death.
Yeah.
I think that's definitely something that should have happened. And then, like I say, so then what ends up happening is you get to the sort of climax, you get to your final act of the movie, and you end up just fucking knocking characters off every couple of minutes because you haven't got the
Yeah.
time. You haven't got the time, and so you need to start offing these characters, and you end up doing things like killing one of your main characters off screen. You know, because realistically, the scene where Joe dies, for example, when they've gone back into the house, right?
Yeah.
And I quite like that whole sort of set piece.
Yeah.
They've gone back to have a look at the footage, and it's one of the creepier moments of the movie. Like that as a set piece, Stella's death, I actually quite like that again as a set piece. I think, even though we don't see that one on screen, I think that's one of the ones I'm fine with not seeing on screen, because like you say, you've got that shot of the legs underneath the sort of cubicle, and I actually think
So
that,
easy to film as well. You
yeah,
just hold your style up and go, Irish chick.
yeah, but it's really effective. It makes it seem quite brutal with the blood coming down, and and then you get to the final act, and it just seems so rushed.
Yeah, because like Lucy's one as well. The fact that it's not even like the way that others were killed. All the other ones they've killed have got like burn marks on them and stuff like that. You just see her hanging in a lift shaft.
Yeah, that's it. It's a very, even the reveal of her death, it just feels really sort of throwaway, doesn't it?
And the thing is, he cuts her down, and then the guy that's a demon goes, "Oh, yeah, she's definitely dead," sort of thing.
Yeah.
And you're like, "But you already revealed before that, so this isn't like a big reveal either." So that whole scene, it's as if they've put it in the wrong fucking place.
Yeah. Also, right, this isn't just a problem I have with this movie. This is just a problem I have with movies in general. Why did he feel the need to reveal himself before he'd killed everyone?
I know.
Like, if you could have just not done that and easily gotten Liam as well.
Aye.
I
Because
mean, I know.
it hints at it being Liam quite a lot. Liam quite a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, it hints at him as well.
Well, that's
So
it.
it hints between three different characters and not him.
Yeah, because you've got your hints of it being Becker,
Yeah,
hints of it being Rob, not Rob, sorry, Liam.
yeah. And Rob's the other one, yeah.
Yeah, and Rob, and obviously it ends up being Rob.
Not Rob. Sorry. What's the dealer's name?
Joe.
Joe. Yeah, sorry, mixed them two up for a second.
Also,
Yeah, Joe's the other one.
Can I just go back and say the introduction of Joe is the most bizarre fucking thing.
Creepy fucker, right?
Like, and she's just happy to like, you're in
I remember hearing folks say lines like that, like it was commonplace. That was not something that folks thought was out of order or weird. He literally goes, "I've got some naughty pills. Do you want to be a naughty girl?"
Yes!
Always is what she said, right? And I'm not being a dick. I've heard very similar shit back in the day.
Have you ever used that line, Nico?
No, I've never really needed to use those stupid lines.
And maybe this could be our question of the week, the cheesiest chat up line our listeners have ever used.
Well, the best one that was ever used on me was a lassie goes, "I'll fuck you tonight if you can tell what colour underwear I've got." And I'm like,
none.
Red.
She didn't have
and
any.
She went, no, I goes red. She's like, "Oh, look in your left pocket," and fucking pulled her pants out my pocket, and I'm like, straight away check for my wallet and my phone. That's alright. I'll go back with you, no problem.
Oh
yeah, Daddy was an old perv, right?
If anyone's listening to this on the download, Nico just said that to his cat. He's not saying it to you, the general audience. Because that was just like, oh my god, that's the creepiest thing I've ever heard you say, Nico.
Yeah.
But yeah, you've made me completely lose my train of thought.
So yeah, like the whole thing about that, right? I remember plenty of places. Like Amadeus, for example, was probably the biggest nightclub in Aberdeen.
Yeah.
And I remember I was standing speaking to one of the dancers because I knew a few of them. And, and just behind me, you just heard a guy going, "Yeah, nice arse, love. Come on, let's go back to mine." And he flicked her thong. And she was like, "All right," and just walked away with him. And you're like, that's what it was like back then.
It was a different time. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if you did that, if you tried to do that these days, you'll probably get a punch to the face.
Yeah. I remember, like, I've done it myself back then. It was like dames used to fucking grab your arse, and used to grab their arse to go, "Ah, you're all right." And fucking, you wouldn't even get a slap. You'd just be like, "All right." And I'm like, "Yeah, right." And that was it, you know.
Yeah, a very different time.
Very different time.
I was too young for any of this. By the time I was old enough to go out drinking,
You had to ask permission for a kiss. That's weird, by the way. That is still fucking weird to me.
what, asking permission?
No, the whole.
Oh, thank God.
No, the whole. Is it alright if I kiss you now? Because it should be like, what's the word? Natural.
You think it should just be like you can both tell in the moment?
Pretty much, aye.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or somebody leans in for a kiss, you're like, no. You know what I mean? Like that's understandable.
Oh,
Not the,
I know what that reaction feels like. I know what that reaction feels like.
Every male's had that done to them. If you like, you could be Brad Pitt and you've still had that done to you. You know what I mean? Like there's guaranteed one female out there that thinks she's better than you, that you've tried it with.
Oh
So yeah,
dear. Anyways,
you'd be able to just look in their eyes and just know, instead of the whole. It's alright if I kiss you now.
Anyways, I'll drag us shuddering back to the movie. So,
Sorry.
given given everything that we've obviously said about it, you know, if someone was to come up to you right now and be like, "Oh, I've not seen that before. Should I go and watch it?" Would you recommend that they go and watch it?
Yes, I would say watch it for the nostalgia fact.
That's it. Is that the only reason? Just because, you know, if you're nostalgic for that sort of time period, you should go and watch it.
If you're nostalgic for that time period, and the thing is, it is a paint by numbers. If you want to fucking say to somebody, "Well, this is for every movie was like in the 90s and noughties. This is pretty much only demon movie." There you go.
Yeah, I think, I think I think ultimately that's the real sort of drawback for this movie, isn't it? It's like I said, it's competently made. It's decent. There's nothing bad in it. I actually think at times, you know, the tension and the sort of scare factor in it, again, are also things that are done relatively well. The problem just is for me that every single aspect of this movie, you've seen it done in other movies and done better.
Yes.
And therefore, ultimately, you know, I don't think I would recommend people go check out this movie, but just to the simple fact that I could name you probably 50 different movies that do this better, you know, and so I don't think I would recommend people go and see this. I don't know. Anyways, like I said earlier, a slightly shorter episode than normal. Nico, is there anything else about Long Time Dead that you would like to talk about?
Thank you, Amanda, for picking it.
I don't know, like, I just feel like there's not that much else to say about this film.
Yeah, because it is literally, the cast is just, it's the equivalent of getting a heap of folk nowadays that are in all the soaps again and just going, right, let's do a movie from that's basically a Scream ripoff. Is basically what they would do.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, shall we move on then?
Yes.
Okay, let's go on to our next section, and we will talk about some trivia. This may be the shortest trivia section that we have ever had, Nico, because there's
none.
There's fuck all out there. Probably because, again, no one's fucking seen this movie to write down and go looking for any fucking trivia. I don't know the budget to this film. I could not find the budget for this movie anywhere. I trawled the internet. Normally, it's easy. I just go with whatever IMDb says.
Yeah.
There's no budget on there. I checked multiple different websites. I cannot find the budget for this movie anywhere. I'm going to suggest that it's probably a relatively low budget film. I'm going
Yeah.
$1 million max.
Aye, pretty
I
much.
don't
I'd
think
say around about that.
I don't think this movie. There's
And
nothing in this movie. Like I say, in terms of the cast, it's majority at the time soap stars that we've got, so I don't see any
yeah,
of them costing huge amounts of money. In terms of the effects, there's no huge sort of set pieces in this movie, so again, I don't really see them costing any amount of money. I'm saying $1
yeah.
million max. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a bit lower than that.
Aye.
But as I said earlier, according to IMDb, it grossed worldwide $22.6 million dollars, which I
Yeah.
think for this movie is actually pretty decent.
Yeah. Sounds
Um,
about right.
and what again, it's one of those things. This movie is never going to spawn a sequel. You know, this movie is never going to
Even
turn
though it
into,
hints at it.
even though it hints at. I mean, does it hint at a sequel, or does it just hint that the demon is still out there? Did you
Maybe.
really think there was plans, or the directors had plans that they were gonna do a sequel?
Pass. Because you can't feel like the word then. They made sequels to fucking everything back then.
Well, that's also the thing. Do you think it maybe raises a wider question? Do you think directors maybe almost always make movies with kind of having a sequel in mind, if it's a
See,
success?
I've often noticed, right, the ones that are successful are the ones that they're like not really planning a sequel for. They've sort
Yeah,
of left it open but not planned it properly. Like, yeah, I'm not really doing it. Those are the ones that are normally the really successful ones
yeah. So I don't
because
know.
they're leaving it all out there in the first one.
Yeah, it's definitely something that's worth
I do have a
maybe.
little bit of trivia.
Oh, go for
Uh,
it.
the the one that was the demon guy, he was being interviewed on TV, and he said to so everyone would feel like they were all like mates. They all went out clubbing, basically, actually in London to get friendly with each other,
Yeah,
basically,
yeah.
which is nice.
Yeah, that's nice. I mean, if the majority of them are on the soap circuit in the UK as well, they probably were all relatively familiar, or the majority of them were relatively familiar with each other as well.
Yeah, but they were all on different shows. I remember that.
Well, that's true. That's true.
And you
Um,
can't put like it is or here.
mm,
You Corey kind of mix with EastEnders.
no, no, or indeed Emmerdale Farm.
Yeah. Even so, there was a crossover of Emmerdale and Corey.
There was. Our
Yeah.
American listeners have no fucking clue what we're talking about.
And
Right?
we've not even thrown in Hollyoaks there.
No,
That's a whole different
or
genre.
Brookside.
Brookside is dead and buried just under the patio, mate.
Okay, do have a couple other bits of trivia. Significant portions of the dialogue of this film had to be looped in post production when it was discovered that some of the audio recordings made during location work had been inadvertently wiped due to an unfortunate accident / miscommunication amongst the film crew.
Somebody was pissed.
That sounds like to me that somebody just sort of forgot to hit record.
I've got a funny feeling that they were getting to know each other the night before that.
Yeah, I've got a funny feeling they maybe were actually doing rails.
Well, it was nice.
This was only discovered as the film was being prepared for editing. It is possibly, again, we haven't really talked about one of the things about this movie. The sound quality in it isn't great
Yeah.
at times, and that's probably the reason why.
Mm.
Uh,
Like, you could have got some decent tunes at least for the rave part and stuff. You know what I mean?
it was probably too expensive, Nico.
Rave tunes back then, really.
I don't know. You know what licensing music can how costly that can be, especially for films.
Back then you had fucking banging tunes for fucking that type of genre, and fucking any man and his dog could have been like, yeah, chuck it in a movie. Yeah, chuck it in a movie.
Yeah, yeah, missed opportunity perhaps.
Yeah.
The other piece of trivia I've got: the word jinn is in Arabic actually stands for both a genie and a demon. So
Oh,
obviously
okay.
you were talking about, it always goes a genie. It does mean genie in Arabic, but it can also mean a demon. In this demonic remake of a classic genie story taken from 1001 Arabian Nights, instead of granting them wishes, the evil genie seeks revenge on the people who have summoned him. Which, as I said earlier, when I looked up genie, is something that a genie can a jinn can do. It can take revenge on people. So they stuck relatively true to the lore around their subject matter, which is something I think you can give him a bit of credit for.
Aye.
Um, That's it, Nico. That's all I've got for trivia. That is literally the only interesting things I could find about it. I'm really glad you managed to come up with another piece of trivia there, because I was really struggling for this one.
Yeah, I thank God I used to just that was my chill out for on the following day. When I was out the night before, I was just stick on one of the chart shows and have that in the background. Whilst I nursed a hangover sometimes.
Still nurse a hangover all the time, Nico.
Nah, I don't get them as much now, but they hit me harder now.
It's because you're in your 40s.
That's true. Oh,
Okay,
Annie just woke up. Hello, Annie.
chance for another cat to lick themselves on our on our camera. Oh, there he is. Cute.
He does not look happy because he just woke up.
Yeah, that's a bit like me. You saw how I looked, Nico, when I came onto this call.
Yeah, you look like that dog in that meme, you know.
Shall we move on then to our final segment?
Go on then.
Okay, we'll talk about some ratings and the reviews. As always, we'll start off with the critic scores. IMDb scored this movie a 4.7 out of 10. There is no Metacritic score for this movie. Couldn't find one. They don't have one. Nico, what do you think the Rotten Tomatoes critics and the Rotten Tomatoes audience scored this movie?
See, I remember folk liked it, but critics fucking hated it. Like every critic slagged it to death. So I'll say 20, 20. I'll go with lucky number 22 for critics,
Uh-huh.
and I'll go 54 for audience.
You're a little bit off on the audience. Rotten Tomatoes audience scored it 37%.
Right.
The Rotten Tomatoes critics scored it 22%. Spot on.
Just so I went from a lucky number.
um,
Oh,
there,
what did you knock over?
there is no critics consensus because not enough critics have rated this on Rotten Tomatoes. So I don't even have a critics consensus to give people. As I said earlier, we always throw out our movies to our listeners and our followers. Unfortunately, none of you have actually seen this movie. And I'm not convinced, based on our review, that any one of you are going to rush out to seek long time. Listen, I said earlier I didn't recommend people would go and watch this. I always recommend people go and check out horror movies. This is a competently made movie. If you're listening to this episode and you haven't seen Long Time Dead, go check it out just merely for the fact that maybe you want to know what the fuck we're talking about. So maybe you should go and do that. So I also
thought it was alright. I'd recommend. I thought it was decent enough.
I have no listener score for you either, which I think is the first. I think that's actually the second time that's happened to us. I think the only other time that we didn't get an audience score, shockingly, because you think if you had to pick out of all the movies we've done, Nico, if you had to pick which movie if you can, I don't know if you can remember, didn't get a listener score, which one do you think it would be?
It's not like Rubber or something.
No, Rubber got a listener score. Personally, when I was doing this, I was like, oh, it must have been
Oh,
Attack.
Attack of the Herbals, you're thinking.
Yeah, it wasn't. Attack of the Herbals got a listener
I know
score.
it's not that.
It was Cockneys versus Zombies.
No, really?
Didn't get a listener score. So this is only the second time this has happened to us. But like I said earlier, just people haven't seen this movie. I don't think this movie deserves to be at that level of just forgotten.
Yeah, it was actually alright.
Because like I keep saying, it is a competently made movie. So I think that's maybe it's ended up being pretty harsh on the film. I think it's better than that. So I think that's a shame. I did sort of troll some of the reviews and things like Letterboxd, etc., to give us some sort of opinions out there to try and gauge for the listeners as well where people sort of are generally ranking this. So I'll just read a few out of what I've found. A somewhat passable possession / Ouija tale in a wonderfully early 2000s London setting. Kinda worth it for the bad hair and bootcut jeans. Also, the CGI is fire. 4 out of 10. Someone else has written, now this is how you do some shitty 2000s horror. I literally couldn't tell the difference between the three main white guys until the last 20 minutes. 4 out of 10. There's a lot of hair gel in this movie, by the way.
Yeah, yeah,
There is so much hair gel. I don't think I've used hair gel in about 15 years. And which you could probably tell
yeah.
because I have no hair left, but you know,
No, I've got hardly any as well.
I remember being, a 17, 18-year-old and plastering on the hair gel. So
See, I never used the hair gel. That's maybe why you were bald and I'm nay.
I don't think that's why I'm bald. But sure. Someone else has written some scary scenes, but with a predictable plot. It's not the best Ouija board movie, but it's also not the worst. Again, that's it, isn't it? That's the general
Yeah.
thing. 6
It's
out of
like
10
you
for that
said,
one.
the middle, sometimes you
Yeah.
need to be one or the other, not the middle.
I think someone else has written, I think I was 14 when I first watched this and thought it was amazing. Now I'm 34 and this film is pretty shit. 1 out of 10.
Oh, no.
Which it's something I agree, something I kind of agree with. I kind of liked this when I watched it as a teenager, and I'm not nowhere near as big on it now.
Yeah.
Couple more. One of those by the numbers movies that makes you think, well, I've seen worse than this, so that's something. Nah, 4 out of 10. And finally, a somewhat forgotten UK based horror that has some good scares and a relatively good cast and hasn't actually aged too badly. 7 out of 10. So you can sort of see where people are sort of lying on that. They're on the lower end, but I think there's a
Yeah.
general consensus, apart from a couple of them there aside, that this is just a pretty decent movie that's just, yeah, it's just kind of been lost to time, hasn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. It was alright for its time, to be honest, but it genuinely came out at the worst time. If this came out the year before, it would have probably been the best horror of that year type thing,
Yeah,
because
I
there
mean,
wasn't that much good ones back then.
yeah, and if you're going up against UK horror to go out the same year, like you said, as Dog Soldiers and 28 Days Later, you're
Yeah.
gonna have to be pretty fucking exceptional to be the best of the bunch, and this movie is still far from that. So
So
unfortunately,
go on, which one's the better one out of them two? What do you think?
Dog Soldiers and 28 Days Later.
Yeah, you got to pick one.
I think in terms of being a better movie, it's 28 Days Later. And think in terms of which one I'd probably rather watch, it's Dog Soldiers.
See, I'd pick Dog Soldiers both because I think Dog Soldiers is the better movie. It's got the right amount of comedy, the right amount of horror.
Yeah, but they're very different movies. I'm not
Oh
watching
yeah,
28 Days. If I want to watch a comedy horror movie, I'm not going to watch 28 Days Later. I think
yeah,
28 Days Later is a fucking fantastic film. I think it's one of the best British horror films there is.
I agree, but I don't think Dog Soldiers is like a comedy horror. It's still a horror.
Oh, no, come on. Dog Soldiers is very much a comedy horror.
Mm,
Very
it's a
much a
lot.
comedy horror.
It's a lot of good bits in it that are just bog standard horror stuff.
Don't get me wrong. In terms of it's a very dark comedy horror. It's a
Yeah,
very British comedy horror.
yeah,
It's just like you say, it is definitely on that darker side. We're not talking about a Shaun of the Dead or Tucker and Dale here, where it's ha ha every 2 minutes. But there's a lot of really funny fucking shit in that movie.
yeah. I know
Anyways,
she.
in terms of Long Time Dead, Nico, that just leaves me and you. What would you score Long Time Dead on a scale of 0 to 10?
I'll give it a 4.5 because it's worth a watch, but it's it's not like it's the nostalgia factor you're watching it for. It's what the noughties were like, basically.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. I'm not going to be a million miles away from you on this one, Nico. I'm going to give Long Time Dead a 4. I think, like I've said a few times now throughout this episode, I think this is a competently made movie. I think some of the
Yeah,
scares are good. There is some good stuff about this movie. It's got a decent cast, but as I said earlier, we've seen this done before. We've seen it done since. We've seen it done better in a lot of other movies. So
yeah,
I can't give it a good score for all of those reasons. I think it's maybe. I think we're maybe being a little generous in our scores. I think if we were to rate this lower, I don't think anyone would have any real complaints about it. So, I
yeah,
think a 4 out of 10 for me.
yeah.
Um, Given all of that, our scores, the critic scores combined, gives Long Time Dead an average rating of 3.8 out of 10. and it puts
Cool.
it in 72nd place of the now 75 movies we have reviewed on the show. It's a new movie in our bottom 5, Nico.
Is it?
It is. It's fourth from bottom.
Jesus, I didn't think it would be that low.
It is one place above Attack of the Herbals, and one place, which, you know what, it's still shocking to me that out of all the movies we review, Attack of the Herbals is not bottom. We have reviewed worse movies than that. Um, Lost Boys: The Tribe is a worse movie, to be fair.
Yeah, that is just
And long time.
What was possessed in the Lost Boys of Tribes? You know, when I heard that was coming out, I'm like, this has got to be brilliant. They've got his son. Just
I'll just never forget, because obviously we had Boomer on for that episode, how excited he was to talk about this really shit film.
yeah.
So, Long Time Dead is one place below Halloween 3: Season of the Witch.
Yeah, I hate that movie.
Yeah. We both rated that movie lower. It's everyone else that brought that movie up. So, I think, you know, if it was purely down to our ratings, Long Time Dead would probably be a couple of places higher up than that. But I can't justify giving it any higher than what we've given it. I think that's just the place it's going to be. So yeah, for the first time in a while, a new movie in our bottom 5. It takes Human Centipede out of our bottom 5. That is no longer a bottom 5 movie for us.
I'd rather watch it than Human Centipede, I'm not going to lie.
Oh, absolutely not, Nico. You're full of shit.
Well, you would be if you were in the Human Centipede.
Hey, there you go. Anyways.
Feed. Anyway.
Yes, that is going to do it for this week's episode. Nico, as always, thank you so much for joining me this week.
Thank you for having me on again.
No problem. As we sort of said earlier, Nico is going to be away for the next two episodes that we're doing. So we're going to get some fresh faces and some new things happening on the podcast in Nico's absence. He's not coming back.
Fucking. I bet you're doing ones I want to do.
I've already told you know which ones we're doing.
What are you doing again?
So up next on the show, we're going to be talking about Don't Breathe.
Yeah, one I wanted to do.
I've told you that's the one we're doing, though.
I know. And what's the other one?
Joining me, I'll get to that in just a second. Joining me next week, though, is going to be Boomer. He's coming back on the podcast. He has kindly agreed to step in and...
Of course I'm missing it when fucking Boomer's on. That's not fair.
Boomer has kindly decided to come in and fill Nico's very small shoes. So Boomer will be joining me next week to talk all about Don't Breathe. The week after that, we're going to be talking all about, with the new episode coming out, the new movie in the franchise coming out this week at the time of recording, we're all going to be talking all about Insidious.
Yeah, I can afford to lose that one.
Yeah. You literally said to me, "Oh yeah, do that one," because I don't really mind not talking about it.
Yeah, it's fucking. I'll still give you my score. I can give you that now if you want. Right. Anyway,
you can give me the scores. You can give me your scores for those two movies in private when we're not on here.
I will.
And I'm currently working on the special guest for that episode. So.
Okay.
So yeah, that's what we've got coming up over the next couple of weeks. That's what Nico's going to be missing out. If you are someone who likes to watch us on Twitch, obviously this episode, due to recording times and our schedules, didn't go out live on our episode. So if you're watching this video on our Patreon, thank you very much. You are the first people to see this episode. Don't forget, if you're listening to this on the download, though, you can watch episodes live every single Sunday at twitch.tv/podofthedamned. Not only are we doing that, we're starting a new side series of episodes called Bucket List Horror, Nico, and I'm going to want you to do one of these as well. I've already got a number of guests lined up to basically come on and justify one movie that they think should be on a list of horror movies that everyone should see before they die. I've already got about 9 episodes of this lined up, Nico, so...
I wonder what I'll pick.
I think you're going to pick Troll 2.
Oh, totally.
Child's Play?
Yeah, definitely.
Might you pick The Lost Boys, Nico?
What was that?
What if someone else has already picked that?
Then I'll have to pick someone else. And they've got good taste.
No one's picked that yet, Nico. Because no one thinks that's a horror. No, I'm joking. It's a great movie.
How dare you?
It's a great movie. It's still in our top 10.
It's the best
It's
vampire movie of
clinging.
all
It's
time.
clinging on to its place in our top 10 by the absolute skin of its teeth.
It's clinging on by that stake there. That's what it's clinging on by.
But yeah, so we have a new side series of episodes coming up very shortly. So there's going to be a lot more content coming out for you guys very, very soon. And like I say, not all of them will be broadcast live on our Twitch just because of the scheduling of when we're actually recording some of them, but we may decide to broadcast some of them live as well. If you would like to listen to this podcast, if you're watching us on the video or on YouTube or anything, you can find us on all the main podcasting platforms. If you're listening to us on one of those podcasting platforms, please go like, rate, and review this movie. It helps with the algorithms and all that jazz. And if you would like to follow us on social media, you can do. We're on Twitter at Damn Podcast. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Pod of the Damned. And you can email us at podofthedamned@gmail.com. Nico, do you want to throw out your socials?
Sorry, it's not live. It's my fault. To apologize. And my socials are the ones that Ian put up on the page.
I'm going to get you to do a plug one of these days. Anyways, that, like I said, that's it for this week. Nico, thank you once again for joining me. And thank you
for having me on.
everyone for watching, downloading, and listening to this podcast. And until next week on the Pod of the Damned, just remember, you're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't.
And a bye-bye from Sheila.